All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked us out before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. A little bit of both today. On the line with me is Karen Lorre. Karen, how are you?
I feel wonderful. How are you?
Absolutely great. Karen has a pretty interesting resume. We're going to just talk with her a little bit about her background. One of the reasons why she's on the podcast today is she is very much a supporter of RFK. And for those who may not know, I find this hard to believe. I've been in some social circles the last 2 or 3 weeks. And maybe it's because I'm online all the time and all the people that I deal with know what's going on. But Karen, let me ask you if you believe this. I've been in some social circles and I've asked people about what do you think about Kennedy? And they didn't know who he was. They're like, Kennedy, is that like, the Kennedys? And I'm like, yeah. I just found that even if you're not following the campaign, I can't believe you wouldn't know who RFK is. For those who may not know, RFK is the son of Bobby Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1968. He is the nephew of the president who was assassinated in 1963. Let me start there with you, Karen. I know you really like him. You know him. Does it make you angry when he gets denied the Secret Service protection that he is supposed to get? Why don't they give it to him?
I don't have negative emotions anymore.
Okay.
One of the things that I've worked on, they just don't come up anymore. If they do, it's just for a nanosecond. I do think that the Biden administration should give any presidential candidate that asks for it should give them Secret Service. I don't know why they're not. I can't get into anybody else's head, but I do know that it costs Bobby and his campaign quite a bit of money every month to
Mm-hmm.
have his own private security. So maybe they're just trying to drain him of his money or get him
Yeah.
killed. I don't know.
Yeah.
I, I don't like either of those options.
No, I don't like those tactical things that those maneuvers that put people at risk. I'm not big on that at all. Now you have, like I said, you have quite a colorful resume. Just to give some people some background on you, you're a coach, I guess you could say that on how to have your mind and your body, your subconscious mind and your conscious mind all aligned with what you want in terms of your goals and things like that, areas of how we can win in life. You studied mind body science at the University of California and then became an actress. So let me start with, like you said about you don't get mad, you don't have negative emotions, things like that. It sounds to me like this is part of the mind skills that you teach. Am I right about that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. So I've helped people, improve their health, improve their relationships, improve their finances. And a lot of it has to do with what people feel emotionally and what they think. Their thinking impacts their emotions. And a lot of times it's subconscious thinking. So I've helped people clear away things in their subconscious. And it's really fascinating to me because, like, for example, one girl, she had a problem with her car and she was my client. She had a problem with her car where it got flooded and it was a new used car. So she called the car shop and they said, it's past 30 days, can't do it. And then she called another shop where they had done some work between when she bought it and when it flooded. And she told them and they said, we don't know what it is. We can't figure it out. So she was able to get insurance for another car for a month. And at the end of the month, she still hadn't gotten any resolution. Nobody was helping her.
Mm-hmm.
But I remembered that when she was around 5, which she had told me before, she had gotten sexually molested by her cousin, and she went and told her mom and her aunts, and they laughed at her. No one helped her.
Oh.
When we realized that, we ended up working to where she could understand that she could be helped,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was safe to be helped, and that she could get what she wanted, right? And so we worked on her subconscious in that way. The next morning, this is like in the evening, and the very next morning, so less than 12 hours, the car shop called, where the car where she bought the car, that place called her and said, look, if you don't get it fixed in 30 I mean, if you don't get it fixed soon, we will return the car. We'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. The insurance gave her another month for free of a rental car. And then the car place, one of the guys called up and said, look, I don't know what's going on with your car, but I'm going to make it my business to solve this. So she got all the help, like within 12 hours of that session. And you think it's about the car, right? Or you think it's about the car shop that's not being cool, but it's really about what's going on in our subconscious. Are we allowing ourselves to get what we need, or do we have some kind of programming that keeps people from having what they want?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I do, because I had bad programming myself, and I cured it. And so then I feel really excited to help other people have that healing as well.
Sure. Karen is the author of 3 best-selling books. One is Chronic Pleasure, Effortless Enchantment, and Chronic Pleasure in Relationships. All these things talk about kind of the things that she just mentioned. And so, yeah, you have quite the background there. So let me ask you this. How did acting fall into this? Was acting something that came along as an opportunity and you took it, or was that something you went after?
Well, I was studying pre-med. I was really fascinated with pre-med. Like, even in high school, I would ditch school to read science books. I just loved it. But I was really studying mind body science. So I had started doing some modeling, and then people just would call me and say, hey, do you want to be in this show, or do you want to be in that show, or do you want to be in this commercial or that commercial? So it had happened for maybe like 2 or 3 shows. And I thought, geez, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I should take an acting class. And I took an acting class, and I had this, the golden light was shining on me in my mind. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Just felt like the best feeling I'd ever had. And so I thought about it, but I loved science. So I kept going back and forth. It took me a couple months to decide. And one night I was driving, and I was thinking about it, and I heard this voice in my head, which I now believe to be my spirit, but at the time I didn't know. And it said, would you rather have a life where somebody's dictating to you what you need to do, or would you rather have a life of adventure? And I thought, adventure,
Sure.
So I made the decision and I could see that adventure was associated with acting in that moment. And so I began to start thinking about it. Just that was one night. The next morning, or the next afternoon at lunch, I was out to lunch with a friend of mine, and I said, I think I'm going to become an actress. And he said, oh, wow. He said, that's fantastic. You should get an agent. I said, what is an agent? He goes, an agent gets you acting jobs. And I said, oh, cool. I go, how do you get an agent? He goes, you have to get a manager. I said, what is a manager? And he said, they get you an agent. And I said, oh, cool. So I walk out of the restaurant. He's still in the restaurant. I don't know what he was doing, but he was still in the restaurant. And I walk out of the restaurant, and I'm just waiting for him. And this woman comes up to me, and she says to me, are you an actress? And I like literally made the decision the night before. So I was like, yeah, yeah. And she said, I'm a manager. Here's my card. Call me tomorrow. I really want to talk to you. I think I could work with you. And she did work with me, and she helped me get an agent, and she helped me do all sorts of things. And she was great, so she became my manager. So it happened kind of synchronistically.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, when you came on, and I always find it interesting. I had a director on here a couple weeks ago. She's in the process of writing a book about some of the people that you work with, and they all have the same, you were worried about the composition, the lighting in the shot, and all these other kind of things. So I find that humorous to say the least, but it's also, obviously your trade is such that those things all matter. I mean, it can set a mood, it can make you look friendly, it can make you look not friendly. So I admire the artisanship of that. You have, like I said, between the writing and the acting, I know that you're not a political creature, so to speak, and that's okay because there's plenty of that going around. There's plenty of people who are. However, you got politics on your radar a little bit because of your understanding and your relationship of RFK. So obviously, the state of politics is such that we're recycling two candidates that were unpopular 4 years ago. We've had a number of things. I was looking at your Twitter account before we came on here. You're a proponent of free speech, as am I. And that has been threatened in some cases over the past couple of years.
Yes.
You've been on Twitter now for about 10 years, according to your count. What have the changes been since you've been on it? Have you noticed the climate change in the way people treat each other, in the way they talk about current affairs since you've been on the platform?
Well, I didn't actually really do Twitter too much back 10 years ago. I literally only started doing Twitter since Bobby, maybe since a little bit before maybe Bobby started running, or maybe right when he started to run. And by Bobby, I mean Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Sure.
That's what inspired me. So I just started there. So I only have like a year in where I, with any consistency. I didn't hardly ever do Twitter before. And what I've seen though is that they are shadow banning. They are like all these people that I'm friends with on Twitter. I often have to refriend them or follow them because Twitter takes away the friendships or the followings. They take away your points. I've seen it where I had I can't remember what the post was about, but it was something like 21,000 likes. And then I looked a couple of days after and it was 18,000. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Something's going on where even though Elon Musk wants, to be freedom of speech, there is something going on that's not. And I wasn't really on Twitter when there was more censorship with the other owners.
Oh, sure.
But it's still going on. And I don't think it's a smart thing.
Yeah. I can't comment on the source of that. I think it's gotten, for the most part, better. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But it certainly has opened the dialogue up. You have people like Tucker Carlson, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm a big fan of his, but you have on the other side of the coin, Don Lemon, you have people from these different walks of life that seem like they have a pretty strong presence on here, and that isn't true on other platforms. They really guide the narrative. So that kind of leads us into one of the things that's nice about social media, and I would say X in particular, is that you have a candidate like Kennedy who, for whatever reason, like I mentioned, not everybody knows who he is yet. And that's one of the reasons, I'm just speculating here, but he isn't getting a lot of coverage on what you would call the mainstream media, on legacy networks. They don't talk about him endlessly like they talk about Trump. And I don't know what you can possibly say about Trump that you haven't said already, but they're talking about him all the time. And they don't really talk about secondary candidates that much. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but one thing nice about platforms like X and other platforms as well is it gives somebody like him a voice. What are some of the things now? Well, let's kind of talk. You say you know him. Tell us a little bit how you know him and how long you've known him.
I was invited by one of his brothers to be, and now sister-in-law, to be in their wedding.
Okay.
So like in 1990 or something. And so I did that. And then part of that was, we would go, I was living in New York at that time. I was doing a soap opera.
Okay.
And we'd go to Hyannis and play football. They were brutal, though. I got to say, I never played football with guys who would tackle girls. But anyway.
Oh.
It was pretty intense. But so, and we went sailing and we just did a lot of stuff. So I was just around the family a lot. And I didn't really pay any attention to anybody except for my real friends. I mean, I listened to people and I played with them and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't know them really. I just did.
Mhm.
And then when I went after the wedding, when I went back to New York, I walked into a room where there were a bunch of my friends and Bobby was there. I didn't know who he was at the time because I
Mhm.
hadn't really seen him at the event. I mean, he was there, but I just didn't focus on him. And he turns around and he goes, "Hey, weren't you at my brother's wedding?" And I said, "Your brother? Who's your brother?" And he said the name. And I said, "Oh my God, yeah, I was there." And he said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, so that's how we became friends." And he was at the time working at the Hudson River Keeper, suing everybody who was polluting the river, everyone who was killing the
Mm.
fish, everyone who was, lying to the fishermen. And the fishermen were his biggest supporters. And
Mhm.
so I just remember I would go and watch, anything that he was talking about. I love the environment. I sailed to Hawaii when I was 18. So I have a real love for the environment. I lived in Montana just for a summer when I was in high school. So I did just nature is so important to me. And so when he was doing that, I just loved it. I just thought it was fantastic. So I'd go hear him speak. We took kids from Bedford-Stuyvesant, which was a very impoverished area,
Mm.
took them on a boat and then took them hiking across the river. And they were so excited. And Bobby showed them falconry and showed me falconry, so there was like those falcons have strong talons.
Oh, yeah.
You wear a little leather sleeve thing, but I was like, wow, if I didn't have that on, they could probably they were strong.
Oh, yeah.
But the kids were so sweet. So they hadn't seen trees like that. I mean, maybe one or two, but not like in a
Yeah.
forest where we were. And they hadn't seen, all the creatures and butterflies and birds, special birds and unique birds and colorful birds. And they hadn't seen, just the mass of nature that was all around. And so it wasn't very abundant nature in
Mhm.
Bedford-Stuyvesant. And so Bobby wanted to give them, an experience of nature. And it's interesting because I have a show called Stories We Love. And on that show, one of the people I interviewed is a guy who said that he creates natural zones in Wisconsin. And he's brought back tons of creatures and birds and animals and all sorts of things, badgers and different kinds of bugs and different kinds of birds, and it's really cool. But what he does is he takes kids from the school district all around and teaches them about nature, and the kids help plant little trees or plant whatever. And he said to me on my show, he said, when a child learns about the environment with a mentor, when a child is exposed to
Mhm.
nature and then learns about nature through a mentor, that child will take care of nature when they grow up, statistically
Sure.
speaking, he was saying. And when I heard that, that was just a couple years ago, and I thought about Bobby, I thought, that's what he's doing. He may not even know he was creating that, but what he was doing was creating a group of kids, and he did this often, like bringing kids from impoverished places, bringing a group of kids who would now have a sense of how magnificent nature is and be more prone to take care of it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, yes. That's fantastic, and I've heard that a lot about him, that he's very much there's all the videos of him, and, doing there's the video of the snake where he's doing something with the snake. I wasn't sure what was going on with that, but he's definitely the outdoorsy type. And he's known for that. I do believe that that is something that's missing in today's society because kids these days are glued to devices.
Right.
And there's nothing necessarily wrong with playing games on your iPad or whatever, or your, on the TV or whatever, once in a while as part of other things. But we've seemed to lose that connection with nature. Is that something you've noticed in people?
I I I I have a lot of young friends in their teens and 20s who love nature. So in my own experience, I don't have that too much that I can see.
Okay.
But I do hear about other people having that experience. And, kids don't want to go outside sometimes, and you have to go outside. It's where you get vitamin D. It's where so many things happen outside that it's just wonderful. We always, as a kid, I always played outside. My whole street, we had like, I think like 18 young kids all at the same time. All the
Hmm.
parents had their kids at the time. We just like be playing baseball in the street, or football, or tag, or some other thing. Just playing, riding our bikes for miles and doing
Yeah.
all that stuff. And I think it's so important. And I love when kids are active. But like I said, most of the kids I know, like one is a rock climber. Another one is a soccer player, and so she's outside
Mm.
all the time. They're just like, they're doing things.
Sure.
But I do think that I've heard other people talk about what you're saying.
Yeah, I would have to say that that's, when you look at the obesity and all the other things that's going on, I believe it's certainly diet, and you can't out train a bad diet, as I'm sure you know. I mean, you can't. You eat an entire pizza, and it takes a lot of effort to get that, burn that amount of calories. So a lot of it's diet, but a lot of it is inactivity too. And so I will say this: RFK seems very physically fit. I mean, he's something like 70 or thereabouts, and he looks like he's just jacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, is he a proponent of fitness and working
Oh,
out and
yeah.
all that? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I was just thinking today we should do. This actually came from Leaner Tap. She's on Twitter, and she said, "Make America fit again." You know,
Yeah.
and she did 24 push-ups, and I just think that's a great thing. For him, I thought also, make government have integrity again would be another one. That's not
Yes.
as easy to remember though. MGHIA.
Yeah. That is. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I think one of the things I'll ask you this, and here again, you don't have to be a. I know you're not a political creature, but in years past, let's say back in the days of Reagan, you had Tip O'Neill. Those two were always going at it, and even to an extent, Clinton and Newt Gingrich, they went at it as well. They had different ideologies, but I think, let's say, during those time periods, people lived in the same reality. What scares me now is I think that people not only feel that they're entitled to their own opinion, which is fine, but they're also entitled to their own facts. That we have become so ideologically driven that we won't accept the other perspective as true at all.
Right.
We're totally isolated in our own reality. So even when you have a dynamic candidate like Kennedy, I think it's a challenge to break through that, because you have to get votes to win. And it was a time when these radical elements were very small percentages of the electorate, and now they're not. The electorate now is very much consumed by people who are ideologically driven. They don't care. They're not interested in finding common ground with you. They're interested in advancing an agenda.
Right.
Does that? I don't know that it's. I'm a little nervous about that. How do you feel about that? Are you hopeful, or do you think somebody like Kennedy can change that?
Oh, I think he could change that because he wants to stop corruption. That's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important things, because if you stop corruption, then you don't have problems in the USDA with the children's food. You don't have the military industrial complex bribing politicians to keep wars going. You don't have the EPA allowing in toxic chemicals into your food and air and water and soil. It's so,
Yeah.
I believe he can stop the corruption because he's been fighting it. I mean, from when I first met him, he was fighting the corrupt EPA at the time,
Hmm.
and the corrupt companies that were just, spewing toxins into the Hudson. He cleaned up that Hudson. I mean, it was quite
Yeah.
amazing. So, but I also think, I don't have a TV, and part of the reason I don't have a TV is because that that phrase TV program, I don't want my mind programmed by someone else. So I don't care who it is, whether it's Bobby or a doctor or anybody. If they mention something, I'll go look it up. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't look it up all the time, but I do look it up
Sure.
good 80% of the time. And I'll actually read the study, or I'll read the bill, or I'll read whatever it is, so I can, or see the information if it's on a video, and check the resources of whoever it is, because I don't know. I don't want to just believe something that someone says. I want to actually check and see. And I want to also see, if I'm reading a study, I want to see who funded the study. I want to
Yes.
see what kind of conflicts of interest that people have. Where do they work? Is a study funded by a university that receives money from somebody that has an agenda, right? So there's all these different things. And I just basically, I don't want to hear the news program me. And part of what the news has done and part of what the government has done that I've seen is just create a narrative on all sides. It seems like both sides, at least
Hmm.
Democratic and Republican, a narrative that makes everybody afraid.
Yes.
And I don't believe in fear anymore. I used to have fear. I used to have anxiety and panic attacks, but I healed all that. And I just don't get afraid anymore. And so for me, I just don't want to be programmed by someone else. I want to understand things and find out what the real truth is. And some things are so complex I don't even know how to
Right.
find out what the real truth is. But I like that, and I won't. You can tell that people are propagandized because one group uses the same derogatory name calling, and
Yeah.
then the other group uses the same derogatory name calling, and it's really interesting. And one thing that's so funny is Democrats say a vote for Bobby is a vote for Trump. Republicans say a vote for Bobby is a vote for Biden. Right? It's
Yeah.
just so funny. So they
Yep.
both have the same propaganda, both sides have the same propaganda, but with different characters
Sure.
inserted in.
Yeah, that's true. I will say this though. I think in the past, third party candidates have hurt one candidate more so than the other when it comes to Republican and Democrat. I kind of feel this time around that he is. I don't want to say taking from them equally, but I really think in a three-way race you could have almost a three-way tied type race where people don't like either one of the mainstream candidates, either the Republican or the Democrat. So it isn't so much that they're taking one from the weaker candidate. They're both of the candidates are relatively weak.
Yeah.
So
And
I go ahead.
I was just going to say regarding, let's say Ross Perot or any of those other people who wanted to be independent at that time, there were, most of the country was either Democrat or Republican.
Yeah.
Now we have about, from the last study I saw, 25% Democrats, 25% Republicans, 49% independents.
Yes.
So I think it's a different time in terms of that. Yeah, I think it's a different time. I didn't mean to interrupt you though. So what else were you
No,
going to?
no, you're fine. My point simply was you don't have candidates that are very dynamic. I was talking about this recently. The last couple of elections have been about the anti-vote, meaning
Yeah,
I don't want A, but I can't stand B, so I'm going to vote for A. So you just vote against the other one. We
right,
haven't we haven't had a candidate where people have voted for in a long time.
right.
And so this being the case, we're this time around, we're here again. We're back to Trump and Biden. It's the perfect ground for a third party candidate. I don't think that either one of them are that attractive to the voter base. And like you said, you have a lot more playground in the independent circles now than you did whatever that was 30. It's hard to believe that was 30 years ago already or whatever it was when
Yeah,
Ross Perot was it. Yeah. So you have a lot more playground now. Back then you had a very small area to play in, but it's very big now. So I'll say this to kind of round things out. I know you're really hoping for Kennedy, and I got to say he seems like a very attractive candidate at this point. I mean, in something that my wife and I did donate to him because I think he needs his voice to be heard. At this
mm,
point, I don't know. I'm not to the point yet where I'm gonna. This is the person I'm going to vote for, but I think his voice needs to be heard. And with that being said, what would be your message of hope? I mean, for I know a lot of people out there, they don't watch the news because they can't stand it. That they don't want to. They're just totally disenchanted with the whole process. What would be your message of hope? You know, Kennedy. What would be your message of hope for them?
well, in the time that I've known him, which is about 33 years, He's always had integrity.
Yeah.
Always been honest, even when it didn't serve him, like
Yeah.
transparent. And
Yeah.
he's always fought for the people. He's fought
Yeah.
for the fishermen. He's fought for the Cree Indians. He's fought for NAACP. You know, he's just
Yes.
really always fought for people. And he's always been very dedicated and honoring of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So
Yeah.
when we had lockdown, both Trump and Biden violated the Bill of Rights. So they violated our rights. And the Bill of Rights are there not for the government to take our rights away, but for us to make sure the government does not take our rights away. So he's a real, you know, absolute constitutionalist, I guess you would say. And I love that because I think we do have amazing rights in this country that have been taken away. There's been an appellate court that has said that Biden White House has violated the First Amendment. There's also lawsuits between, I think, Biden and maybe Trump on surveillance starting to happen. So, I mean, do you want a government on either side that is going to censor you? I really trust people to be able to get whatever information they get and then make their own choices.
Absolutely.
And I think if a government doesn't trust you, then that government is not going to take care of you.
Yes.
It's not going to support you in any way. So I love what Bobby's been about. He's always been about helping people. He's always been about taking care of the environment. And it's just, he has the kind of integrity that I really value. Integrity is something that I very much value. So
I'm with you on that. He seems that way to me. I've talked to a number of people now who have known him or worked with him. They all say the same thing. So I'm really watching this thing with RFK very closely, and this could be something. This could make history this time around if things keep going the way they are. He keeps rising in the polls. So we'll see what happens. Your books, we are talking to Karen Lorre, and you spell her last name Lorre. She is the author, Chronic Pleasure, Effortless Enchantment, and Chronic Pleasure in Relationships. Where can people find your books?
Well, people can find them on Amazon, and the first book is on Audible. I have to narrate the other two. I just haven't done it yet. But if people want, if you're listening to this, you can go to chronicpleasurebook.com. So chronicpleasurebook.com, and you can download my books for free because this has been really fun. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate your audience. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And you're on, well, we'll call it Twitter, but it's X now, and you're on there as well.
Yes.
So people can find you there. Karen, thank you very much for coming on the program today. I really appreciate it. A lot of people are excited about Kennedy, including myself. So let's keep that going.
Yes. Thank you so much, Billy. And thank you, everyone who has listened or watched. I really appreciate you too. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My name is Billy Dees. You can find me on the old Twitter, which is now X, at Billy Dees. Real easy to find. And you can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. Thank you very much for listening. And we will talk to you again next week.
Bye. Thank you.